Picture a street where the houses wear more marble than the churches. Now fill it with families who cannot always pay their butcher. Add diamonds that are secretly glass, marriages that are secretly treaties, medicine bottles that are secretly the only thing holding half the great ladies of America upright, and a small army of people in black wool who know every bit of it and have agreed, for wages, to know nothing at all. That's Fifth Avenue, New York in 1899, the richest street on earth, also the best rehearsed. A place where 400 people could perform perfection between 8 and midnight, and where, by midnight, the basement of every house on the block knew exactly what the performance had cost, down to the dollar, down to the tear, down to the pawn ticket. We're going back there tonight. Not as guests coming up the marble steps with our names on a card. We're going in through the servants' door, down the area steps, past the coal hole, into the one class of people on that street who saw everything and were paid specifically to have seen nothing. 1 year, one lady's maid, everything she saw, smelled, carried, mended, and swore on her wages never to repeat. So, I make these history stories, and honestly I still have no idea whether anyone actually sleeps to them or whether you're all just weirdos who want to know how a lady's maid could tell real diamonds from paste in a dark room with her eyes shut. Either way, subscribe if you feel like it. Get comfortable. Here we go. One honest word before the lamp goes down, because this channel keeps its accounts clean. The street is real. The wages are real. The registry offices, the pawn tickets, the copied jewels, the tonic bottles, the fire, the parade, the newspaper men waiting at the area railings with money in their pockets. All of it documented, all of it dated, and I'll tell you as we go which is record and which is reasonable guess. But the servants themselves left almost nothing behind. No memoirs worth the name, no diaries, barely even photographs. That was the whole point of them. So the woman whose hands you'll wear tonight is stitched together from 100 real women in 100 real basements. Her rooms are true, her prices are true, her work is true, and her eyes are borrowed. That's the bargain. Now come and stand behind the mirror. Your fingers are in the small of a woman's back, and they are pulling. Not gently. There is nothing gentle about lacing a corset properly, whatever the fashion plates pretend. You brace your left knee very slightly, invisibly, because bracing visibly would be vulgar, and you draw the silk laces through their eyelets 2 at a time, top pair, bottom pair, working toward the waist, and the woman in front of you exhales on your count the way she has exhaled on your count 500 times, and the whalebone creaks like a ship's rigging taking wind. The room smells of violet powder and hot iron, and the singed feather ghost of the curling tongs cooling on their spirit lamp. Underneath that, gas from the wall brackets, though this house has Edison current too. Underneath that, the smell of the silk itself, which is a smell nobody warns you about. Faintly animal, faintly like rain, because silk is a body too, and it remembers. And in the long glass in front of you both, framed in gilt, you watch Mrs. Fairley's face compose its evening. You have watched this happen so many times you could set a clock by the stages of it. The jaw first, then the eyes, which go from tired to brilliant the way a gas jet goes up when you turn the key, then the mouth, which finds the exact width of smile that means nothing at all, and can therefore mean anything required. If anyone asks, she says to the mirror, in the flat rehearsing voice she uses only with you, because you don't count as a listener, the diamonds are with the jeweller, being reset. Tiffany's is so slow this season. There it is. The third lie of the season. and the season is 9 days old. The first lie was that the Fairleys had declined the Pemberton musical, an invitation which, you happen to know, never arrived. The second was that the new chef is fresh from Paris. He's fresh from Hoboken. And he's very good, and the fiction costs nobody anything. But this third one is different. This third one you will be wearing on your own conscience all evening, because the diamonds are not at Tiffany's. The diamonds, the Fairley Riviere, 39 graduated stones on an invisible knife-edge setting, insured for $40,000, are in a canvas-wrapped box in a private loan office off Union Square, and what will go around Mrs. Fairley's throat tonight is their double, French paste, flint glass with lead in it, cut by a careful man on Maiden Lane, foiled and mounted so beautifully that across a dinner table, under candlelight, under even the new electric light, no one living can tell the difference. Almost no one. You can. And I need you to understand right at the start that this was a real skill, in a real trade, on a real street. A lady's maid of the first class was expected to know jewels the way a groom knows horses. You know that real diamonds are cold. They pull the heat out of your lip if you touch them there, fast like well water, because a diamond drinks heat the way glass never will. You know that paste warms in the hand and stays warm. You know the feel of the two weights. In a dark room, with your eyes shut, you could sort the true necklace from the false one in 4 seconds. And you have done exactly that this very afternoon to make sure the right box went to Union Square and the wrong one came home. That is the kind of thing you know. Welcome to Fifth Avenue, January 1899. Your name is Nora Devlin. You are 30 years old. You were born in a 2-room house in County Monaghan, Ireland, and you came down a gangplank at Castle Garden in the spring of 1887 with 1 tin box, 1 good shawl, a written character from the rectory, and 11 shillings sewn into your hem. You've been in service on or beside this one avenue for 12 years now. 3 households, 1 profession, 1,000 secrets. And you have risen as high as a woman in your line can rise. Lady's maid, $25 a month, board and lodging found, cast-off gowns when madam tires of them. $25 a month. Hold on to that number. Every price you hear tonight, hold it up against that number, because that arithmetic, what you earn against what you know, is the whole story I'm going to tell you. The gown for tonight cost $600 from Worth of Paris, Rue de la Paix, ordered by cable, fitted by his New York agent, a column of oyster-coloured satin embroidered with seed pearls that took some other woman, in some other basement of the world, 400 hours to sew. 2 years of your wages, on 1 body for 1 dinner. The dinner itself, 22 covers downstairs, will run past $1,000 with the wine. The paste necklace cost $300, more than a year of you, and it exists, remember, to save money. And your fingers, which earn $1.25 for every day of their lives, are the fingers that hook the clasp of it. You settle the false stones against her collarbones. They lie there exactly as the true ones would, catching the gaslight, and in the mirror Mrs. Fairley touches one, the 7th stone from the centre. Always the 7th. It is her tell, and she doesn't know she has one. And her evening face closes over her like water over a dropped coin. "Well," she says, "armour on." She has never called it anything else in the 3 years you've dressed her. Not jewels, not finery. Armour. "You'll wait up," she says. It is not a question. It is never a question. "Yes, madam." She stands. The satin falls into its lines with a sound like the sea getting comfortable. and she goes out of the room and down the great stair to be brilliant at 22 people, and you are left alone in the warm gaslight with the curling tongs and the hairpins and the day's discarded underthings, in a bedroom the size of the church you were christened in. You stand there for one moment, in the quiet, because here is what nobody at that dinner table will ever understand, and what you understood by your second year on this street. The people upstairs believe their secrets are kept in safes, in banks, in lawyers' offices. They are wrong. The secrets of Fifth Avenue are kept in the basements. They're kept by the people who empty the wastepaper baskets and carry the breakfast trays and lace the corsets and post the letters, or quietly fail to post them. Every house on this avenue is a theatre, and the servants are the stagehands, and there is not one single stagehand in the history of theatres who did not know exactly how the magic trick was done. You saw everything. You said nothing. That was the position. And in the year I'm going to walk you through, this year, 1899, the last full year of the old century, that silence of yours will be priced, in cash, in a stranger's hand at the area railing 4 separate times, at numbers that will climb until they make your knees go loose. This is a true kind of story. The men who did the offering were real. The trade in servants' knowledge was real and profitable and organised, and the panic it caused in the great houses was real enough to change how an entire class of Americans spoke in front of their own footmen. But that's ahead of us, in the dark of the year. It's a January evening now. There's a supper tray to fetch, a satin train to sponge and hang at midnight, and 5 floors of house between you and your own narrow bed under the roof. Come downstairs first. You can't understand what the servants of Fifth Avenue knew until you understand where they stood while they were learning it. The servants' stair is behind a door papered to match the wall, because the sight of a door that servants use was considered an interruption of the room. You could stand in Mrs. Fairley's bedroom and never know the stair existed. That was the intention. The whole house is built on that intention. There are 2 houses, really, occupying the same address. The one made of marble and silk that faces the avenue, and the one made of iron and soap that runs underneath it and behind it and inside its walls. And the second house exists for exactly one purpose: to make the first house look effortless. You go down the hidden stair with the supper tray balanced on one arm, and I want you to feel this stair, because you will climb it and descend it perhaps 40 times a day. It is 28 inches wide. The treads are bare wood, hollowed in the middle by 50 years of feet. There is no window. There is 1 gas jet per floor, turned down to a bead of blue to save money. And notice that already, in the richest house, on the richest street on earth, somebody is saving money on the servants' light. The wall on your right is warm, because the kitchen flue runs inside it. The wall on your left is cold, because it is the outer wall, and it is January. You descend between fire and frost 5 floors of it, and your wrists learn to keep a loaded tray level in the dark the way a sailor's legs learn a deck. And then you come out into the basement, and the second house opens up around you. It smells of blacking and coal gas and wet wool drying, of silver polish, which smells of rotten eggs, because it is made with things nobody upstairs asks about, of yesterday's roast being turned into tomorrow's soup, and of the big copper boiler that never quite goes cold. The ceiling is low. Iron pipes cross it like the roots of the house growing down at you. The floor is stone, and no matter the month, the stone finds the one thin place in your boot soles by 10 in the morning. Along the corridor, the kitchen, glowing like a forge even at midnight, The scullery where a 14-year-old girl is still scouring copper pans with sand and lemon halves, and her hands, you've seen her hands, are the hands of a woman of 60. The servants' hall with its long deal table scrubbed white as bone. The housekeeper's room, which the staff calls the pug's parlour when the housekeeper cannot hear them, though no one in this house would dare say it above a whisper. The butler's pantry with its locked green baize door behind which lives the silver. 312 pieces, you have counted them, because counting them twice a year is partly your business too, worth more than every wage paid in this basement for a decade. 14 servants sleep and labour in this house so that 4 people may live in it. Hold that ratio in your mind, 14 to 4, and the 14 are ranked as strictly as any army. Butler at the top, then housekeeper, then you. The lady's maid stands third and answers to the mistress alone, which makes you envied, and envied is a cold thing to be in a warm basement. Then the cook, who would dispute the entire order of precedence with a cleaver if permitted. Then footmen, housemaids, kitchen maids, the scullery girl, the useful man who carries coal. Everyone knows their place at the servants' table to the inch. You sit above the salt with the upper servants. The lower servants do not speak at dinner until spoken to. The people upstairs think rank matters to them. They have never eaten in a servants' hall. Mrs. Byrne is waiting for you at the door of her parlour. The housekeeper is from Galway, though 30 years in New York have sanded her accent down to a faint turn on certain words. She's 58 years old, 5 feet nothing, dressed in black silk that whispers when she moves, and she carries at her waist the chatelaine, the ring of keys that open every cupboard, every store closet, every locked drawer in this house. 19 keys. She could tell you blindfolded by weight and tooth which was which. In the second house, the house below, Mrs. Byrne is not the housekeeper. She is the government. The tray goes back full. I see, she says. Mrs. Fairley didn't touch the supper. You don't say this. You don't have to. The full tray says it, and Mrs. Byrne reads trays the way brokers read the tape. A lady who eats nothing before a dinner party is nervous. A lady who is nervous 9 days into the season, in a house where the tradesman's boy has come twice this week and left twice without being paid. Mrs. Byrne does the sum, files it, and her face shows nothing at all. You've seen her do this 10,000 times. It is the first great skill of the basement, and she is its master, to conclude everything and express nothing. Sit, she says. Eat it yourself. It'll only go to waste, and you're on your feet till 2. And here is a thing I need you to understand about below-stairs food. Because this channel has sat at these tables before, on other nights, in other houses, and it is always the same beautiful crooked arithmetic. The servants of the rich ate better than almost any working people in America. Cold quail, yesterday's ices, the ends of champagne bottles, and owned nothing, not the chair they sat on, not the hour they ate in, not the candle they ate by. You eat Mrs. Fairley's untouched supper standing up at the dresser, because the servants' hall is being laid for the staff's own late meal, and you don't count as seated company in the middle of a working night. Chicken in aspic, 2 years of French technique in it, eaten standing in 90 seconds by a woman in black wool. That is the whole Gilded Age on one plate if you want it. While you eat, the house speaks. You've learned to hear it. The dumbwaiter ropes creak, the fish course going up. A bell trembles on the board along the ceiling, one of 24 bells, each with its own voice. That flat one is the library, and it will be Mr. Fairley wanting the whisky that the doctor has told him to stop wanting. Above your head, very faint, like weather happening in another country. The dinner, chairs, laughter in waves, the particular bright shriek of Mrs. Pemberton, who laughs at things that are not funny when she has seen something that interests her. You can follow the whole meal from the basement without seeing it, the way a stoker follows a voyage from the engine room. Charlie comes down at the fish course with the wine coolers for refilling, and Charlie's worth your attention, because Charlie's going to matter. Second footman. 22 years old, 6 feet tall, and understand, he was hired for being 6 feet tall. Footmen were paid by the inch in this city. A matched pair of tall footmen ran $5 a month more than short ones, and that is a documented fact of the trade, not a joke. Chestnut hair, quick eyes, and the fatal gift of being amusing. He sets down the coolers, leans against the dresser beside you and says out of the side of his mouth, "Pemberton woman's wearing the emeralds tonight, the ones that were stolen in Paris last spring." "They were never stolen," you say. "No," Charlie agrees, happy as a cat. "They were never stolen. They were sold. And what she's got on tonight came from the same bench on Maiden Lane as..." He tips his head very slightly toward the ceiling, toward the throat of your own mistress, and does not finish the sentence, because Mrs. Byrne has come out of her parlour with the linen book under her arm. She doesn't scold. She does something worse. She stops, and she looks at Charlie for about 4 seconds, and then she says, in a voice you could iron sheets with, "What do we know in this house, Charles?" Charlie straightens off the dresser like a man coming to attention. "Nothing, Mrs. Byrne." "What did we see this evening?" "Nothing, Mrs. Byrne." "That's the trade," she says, and goes past him up the corridor, keys ringing softly, like small church bells for a very small church. "That's the trade." You will hear her say it 100 times this year. Everything in this country is a trade, and this is yours. They pay you in 2 coins, money and shelter, and you pay them back in 2 coins, labour and silence, and everyone below stairs understands that the silence is the dearer coin. Break a plate and it comes out of your wages. Break the silence and there are no wages, anywhere, ever again. And how that enforcement worked, the machinery of it, I'll show you soon, because it is the engine of this whole story. The dinner upstairs ends at midnight. The carriages are called. You hear the front door's cold air come down the back stair like a hand laid on your neck, and then the house exhales, and the second shift of your day begins. Because now the performance is over, and the stagehands strike the set. The footmen carry down the plate, and every fork is counted before anyone sleeps. The parlour-maid gathers 22 napkins of embroidered linen, each one costing more than her week, and drops them down the chute to the laundry. In the dining room the candles are snuffed, and the good beeswax stubs are collected. They belong by ancient below-stairs custom to the butler, who sells them. Everything in this house that the family is done with becomes somebody's tiny salary. The tea leaves to the kitchen maids, the dripping to the cook, the newspapers to the useful man. And this quiet secondary economy is as old as service itself, and nobody upstairs has ever once thought about it. And you go up the 28-inch stair to undress your mistress. This is the hour I would trade all the others to show you, because this is the hour when the avenue tells the truth. Mrs. Fairley sits at the glass while you take down her hair, and the evening comes off her in layers, exactly as it went on, but in reverse, and without the armour-plating of will. Out come 104 hairpins. You count them into their china dish by habit, because a lost hairpin in a bed is a ruined sheet, and a ruined sheet is somebody's wages. Off comes the false necklace, into the velvet box with the true box's lock. Off comes the gown, $600 of it, and you carry it to the light and go over every inch, because your reputation is sewn into its hem more surely than your 11 shillings ever were sewn into yours. A wine drop on satin, sponged with warm water and a breath, will vanish. Leave it till morning and it's fixed there forever, like a thing said in anger. She talks while you work, they always talk. This is a fact about ladies' maids that the etiquette books never printed, but every woman in your trade knew. At midnight, with her hair down and her stays unlaced, the mistress of the house talks to her maid, because the maid is the only human being left in her day who is not an audience. You have heard, at this hour, in this room, and 2 rooms before it in other houses, things that no husband, no lawyer, and no priest of this city was ever told. Tonight she says to the mirror, not to you. Mrs. Pemberton asked after the Riviere. She looked at my throat the way the customs men look at your boxes. Your hands keep moving in her hair, steady as a metronome. That steadiness is a skill you were 3 years learning. The hands must never confirm anything. The jeweller is slow, madam, you say. Everyone knows Tiffany's is slow this season. Her eyes come up and find yours in the glass, and for one held breath the 2 of you look at each other over the top of the lie like 2 soldiers looking at each other over a wall. And then she says, yes, everyone knows that, and closes her eyes, and the subject is laced shut. You bank her fire. You lay out tomorrow's morning things. You carry the day's underthings to the chute, put out the gas, and climb, because your room is at the very top, under the roof, where the house keeps its heat least and its servants most. 5 floors, past the sleeping theatre of it all, to a room 9 feet by 11 that you share with the head housemaid. An iron bed, a washstand, a window that looks at a brick air shaft, a floor cold as a pond. Under your bed, the tin box you carried down the gangplank in 1887. It holds everything you own that matters. Your papers, your bank book, your dead mother's ring, and a flat packet of letters tied in grey ribbon that we are going to leave shut, you and I, for a long while yet. Every servant on this street has a box like it. Remember the boxes. This story ends in 1. Annie Duffy is awake when you come in. Head housemaid Derryborn, 26, sharp as a tack and funny as sin. The nearest thing to a sister that 12 years in America has issued you. She's sitting up in bed with a shawl around her shoulders, mending her own stocking by candle, and she says before your door is even shut, well, did the Pemberton wear the emeralds that were never stolen? The basement telegraph, faster than Western Union and no wires to cut. Go to sleep, Annie, that's a yes. She bites the thread, satisfied, and blows out her candle, and the last thing she says into the dark is the oldest joke in the second house, the one every servant on this avenue said in some form on some night. Good night, Nora. Mind you forget everything you knew by morning. You lie down in the cold in your own narrow bed, and above the air shaft a small piece of January sky shows, with 1 star in it, and 5 floors below you the great house ticks and settles around its secrets like a strong box around paper. You saw everything. You said nothing. That was the position, and you are very good at your position. Mourning in a great house does not begin with the family. It begins 2.5 hours before the family in the dark, the way every morning in history has begun. Someone gets up in the cold and lights a fire so that someone else can wake up warm. At 5:30, the scullery girl rakes the kitchen range. At 6, the housemaids are moving through the dark rooms like ghosts in reverse, laying fires, because every one of the 11 fireplaces in this house must be cleaned, blacked, laid, and lit before any fairly eyelid so much as flickers. The work must be finished before it can be seen. That is the first commandment of the avenue. Work is only perfect when it appears never to have happened. Your own day starts at 6, with cold water in the basin and your hair done tight by feel. No mirror worth the name. And by 7 you're pressing the morning's newspapers with a warm iron. Yes, ironing the newspapers. It sets the ink so it won't grey Mr. Fairley's fingers. And if you think that is the strangest use of a flat iron in this story, wait. But before the trays go up, I have to take you back 9 days to the 2nd of January, because on the 2nd of January you did the errand that this whole year turns on, and you did it in your plainest coat. That morning Mrs. Fairley called you to her sitting room, closed the door, and stood for a moment with her back to you, looking out at the avenue. Then she opened the jewel safe herself. She never opens it herself. And took out the leather case with the Riviere in it, and said, in a voice pressed flat as the newspapers, "You will take a cab, not our carriage. You know the place on Union Square. Mr. Fairley is not to be troubled with this. Mr. Fairley is not to be troubled with this. File that sentence. She's pawning her diamonds to pay her own dressmaker and her own florist, and half the servant wages of the winter, and her husband must not know, in the same house where her husband, 1 floor below, keeps a locked drawer of margin notices that his wife must not see. They are hiding the same fire from each other in the same burning building, and both of them use you as the fireproof box. So you went. Plain coat, plain hat, the case wrapped in brown paper and string like a parcel of mending, inside a rush basket, because a lady's maid with a basket is invisible, and a lady's maid with a jewel case is a headline. And I need you to understand that there was nothing unusual about this errand. This was a trade, a whole quiet industry. The loan offices off Union Square and along 6th Avenue kept private entrances for exactly this custom. A curtained side door, a discreet parlour, no window display. And the men who ran them could tell you the maiden name of every mortgaged necklace in New York. The pawnbrokers of this city took in millions of dollars a year, and the fashionable end of the trade lived not on sailors' watches but on society's paste and panic season, on jewels that crossed the counter in January and came home in May like migratory birds, documented, dated, advertised. Loans on diamonds in strict confidence ran in the same newspapers that covered the balls where the diamonds were missed. The clerk wore a green eye shade and never once looked at your face. Faces were not his business. He weighed the Riviere stone by stone on a little brass balance. He breathed on the 7th stone and watched the mist die off it instantly, the way it only dies off a true diamond, the same test as your lip, just politer. Then he wrote in his ledger and counted out $4,000 in hundreds. The necklace insured for $40,000, loaned against at 1/10. That is the arithmetic of desperation, 10 cents on the dollar and grateful for it. And he gave you the ticket, a small blue card, number 1104, and Mrs. Fairley could not keep that ticket, because Mr. Fairley has the only other key to her safe, and a blue pawn ticket in a jewel safe is a confession with a number on it, so it lives with you, sewn flat into the lining of your workbox under the spools, where 12 years ago a girl from Monaghan sewed 11 shillings into a hem. You have risen in the world, Nora. The denominations have improved. Hold up that morning against your $25, and now come with me through the house of glass money, because once you know what to look for, you can read the finances of every family on this avenue without opening a single ledger, and the servants read them every day. The signs are all below the waterline where only the basement sees. The butcher's boy who waits at the area door for the cook's order, and then, lately, waits a little longer for something else, and goes away without it. The tradesmen of this city carried the 400 on their books for months, sometimes years, because dunning a great name too loudly cost you every great name, and so the bills aged in drawers like wine. The coal order quietly cut from the best anthracite to the second grade for every fire the guests will never sit at. The champagne Perrier Jouet for the table and something cheerful and Californian decanted for the crush of the ballroom where nobody can see the label. Mrs. Burns' linen book, where the sheets are turned sides to middle to double their lives. In a house with a marble stair, the mistress's monogram sheets are cut down the worn centre and rissoon by you, because seamstress is inside your title too. $600 for one gown upstairs, 90 cents saved on sheeting downstairs. Both are true, both are this house. And when I say this house, I need you to understand what that means on this avenue in 1899. This is not one eccentric family caught short. This is a street where fortunes were often newer than the paint, margined to the eaves, performed nightly, where, and the estate lawyers found this out again and again, in documented probate, to the public delight of the newspapers, more than one famous name died owing his own servants their back wages. The great fronts were financed like the fronts of stage sets, and the servants stood behind them among the scaffolding and the sandbags, holding the ropes. Mr. Fairley, now, since we're behind the mirror, look at him properly, 51 years old, railway money, second generation, which on this avenue makes him almost aristocracy. A heavy, handsome, careful man who dresses beautifully because you can float a great deal of credit on a well-cut coat. He is kind in the absent way of a man doing sums behind his eyes at breakfast, and he sleeps at the far end of the corridor in his own room and has for 4 years. I'll say this once, plainly, and we'll leave it, because the basement never needed it said twice. On this street separate bedrooms were fashionable, and fashion is a wonderful curtain, and every servant who carried the morning trays knew exactly which houses kept the fashion and which houses had needed it. 2 trays, 2 rooms, 2 fires, 1 marriage held together by engagements printed on cream cards 6 weeks in advance. Nobody below stairs judged it, particularly. A marriage on this avenue was a merger, and the servants graded them like clerks. Some houses were happy, some were cold, and the worst were the loud ones, and the Fairleys were a cold house run politely, which, Mrs. Byrne would tell you, is the easiest weather there is to work in. His man, the valet, Mr. Prewitt, is the 3rd member of your basement aristocracy. You, Prewitt and the butler hold among you the family's entire private life, divided like a will. Prewitt is 60, English, bald as an egg, and has said perhaps 40 full sentences in the 3 years you've known him. But every morning he brushes the coat Mr. Fairley wore the evening before, and empties the pockets onto a tray, papers folded exactly as found, and Prewitt cannot help reading, because his eyes are attached to his mind, and one morning this January his eyes met yours, across the servants' table with a particular flatness, and that flatness told you the pockets were full of broker's paper, and that is how the 2 halves of the house's secret met and married. Below stairs, in silence, across a scrubbed deal table, long before either principal upstairs suspected the other of anything at all. The servants of a great house always assemble the whole truth first, because the servants are the only people who see all the rooms. And then there is Albert, and thank God for Albert, because this house needs 1 warm room, the chef. Monsieur Alphonse on the menus Mrs. Fairley has printed in French for her dinners, Albert Kessler of Hoboken across his own kitchen table, a big pink man who learned his sauces as a saucier's undercook at Delmonico's and his accent from a Marseillais roommate, and who commits his one daily fraud with the joy of an artist. The accent goes on at the green baize door like a clean apron and comes off with it. The staff protects the fiction absolutely, not for his sake, for the pleasure of owning it. A secret nobody upstairs knows is the only property a servant holds outright, and the basement is rich with them the way the attic is rich with cold. Albert feeds you all like a conspirator. The trimmings of the fillet into the servant's pie, the broken meringues to the scullery girl who eats them with her ruined hands cupped, like a communicant. $5 a week that man's kindness would cost the house if kindness were billed. It never is. It is the one line the ledger never sees. Then February came, and God turned the thermostat of the whole eastern half of the country down to a number nobody had ever seen, and the avenue got a lesson in what its servants were made of. The second week of February, 1899. This is record. Look it up in any almanac. The Great Arctic Outbreak. The thermometer in this city went below zero and stayed there. -6 degrees one morning, the coldest February New York had ever written down, and then on the 12th and 13th the blizzard came up the coast on top of the cold and buried the street to the area railings. 16 inches, drifts to a tall man's chest. The avenue went white and silent and beautiful, like a corpse of itself, and every house on it became 2 Arctic expeditions living one above the other. Upstairs, inconvenience, a musicale postponed. Mr. Fairley worked from the library, the telephone wires held. Downstairs the temperature of the year showed its true reading. The furnace ate coal like a liner, 1.5 tons in 2 days, and you know because the useful man's back is the meter, and he is 54, and you watched Mrs. Byrne watch him come up from the coal-hole grey-faced and hold her keys and calculate visibly for once whether the house could afford a second man and conclude it could not, and send him down again with hot brandy and milk in her own hand, as the interest on a debt the wage would never pay. The milkman's horse went down on the ice at the corner of 51st and had to be shot where it lay, and the sound came flat off the snow like a door slammed once, and the scullery girl cried into the sink, and cook let her, which was cook's whole vocabulary of love. Pipes froze in the attic. In your room the water in the basin was ice by morning, and you and Annie slept in your shawls and boots like soldiers, 4 floors above fireplaces nobody was using, in the richest house you had ever seen. And Mrs. Fairley gave a dinner on the 15th anyway. Of course she did. 12 covers in a frozen city, terrapin and canvas-back duck, because the season does not acknowledge weather, only weakness. You laced her into the oyster satin while the wind screamed at the windows like the airshaft's opinion of it all, and she looked at the glass necklace at her throat and touched the 7th stone and said, flat voice, rehearsing voice, armour on, and went down her warm marble stairs to perform solvency for 12 people performing it right back at her. That night the false stones caught the candlelight beautifully. Paste always does. Paste was made to be looked at. It's the true ones that sit in the dark on Union Square in a canvas box in the cold. Now I have to open a door I would rather leave shut because you cannot understand what the servants knew without it, and because the servants themselves spoke of it, when they spoke of it at all, more gently than they spoke of anything else on this street. The medicine cabinet. Every lady's maid in New York carried keys of her own, and one of them opened the little mirrored cupboard in Madame's dressing room, and I will tell you what was in the one you tended in your second household 6 years ago on this same avenue. 11 blocks down because it was in some measure in all of them. Bromide of potassium for sleep, chloral hydrate for worse sleep, a blue bottle of nerve tonic from a druggist on 6th Avenue, cherry sweet, 1/5 alcohol by the honest label. And behind the tonic, wrapped in a handkerchief as if cold, the laudanum, tincture of opium, 25 cents the ounce at any respectable pharmacy. No questions, no prescription, as legal as tea. If you have kept me company on other nights, you have heard what the doctors of that century poured from those bottles with clean consciences and complete confidence. This is where those bottles ended up, on the marble washstands of the best bedrooms in America, refilled by ladies' maids. Her name doesn't matter. She was your second mistress, and this channel keeps its bargain. So understand that I have stitched her, like you, from a dozen documented women. The bottles, the doses, the druggist's ledgers, the physician's own alarmed journal articles about the opium habit among ladies of the better classes, all of that is record, dated and printed while it was happening. The historians who counted afterward reckon the typical American opiate dependent of the 1890s was not the dockside figure the magazines drew. She was a native-born white woman of the comfortable classes between 30 and 50, and she'd begun with the doctor's honest bottle for headaches, or grief, or what the century called female trouble, because it did not care to ask further. What you remember is her voice. How it went over 2 years from a woman's voice to a voice coming from a woman. How she held your wrist. This is the thing you cannot leave in any box. Held your wrist each evening while she counted her own drops into the glass. 12, 13, 14, because she did not trust her hand alone. And having counted, looked up at you with the eyes of someone at a railing above deep water and said, "You won't speak of it, Nora." Not a command. A question wearing a command's clothes. No, madam, never. And you never did. Understand what your silence was in that house. It was not covering for her. It was the last floor under her. Her husband chose not to know. Her doctor renewed and called it treatment. Her friends saw the pupils and the 4 o'clock absences and said migraine, poor thing, and moved the luncheon. Everyone in her life had a reason to look away, and only the servants could not look away, because the servants carried the trays and found the bottles, and counted silently along with her. 12, 13, 14. The world called what the servants did discretion. Below stairs it did not feel like discretion. It felt like standing very still, for years, holding up a falling woman with your face closed, and being paid $20 a month, and the pity of it. I want this exact. The pity was the heaviest thing you carried in that house, heavier than the water cans, heavier than the trunks, and there was no chute to send it down and no ragman to buy it. She is why you left that place. Not the work, the watching. When the family went to Europe in '93, the rescuer, the papers called that whole fashionable migration, and the servants' telegraph called it what it was. You asked for your character and moved 11 blocks north to the Fairleys, and you learned that you cannot move 11 blocks away from a thing you know. Knowledge has no registry office. It just comes with you, in the box under the bed. But everything else in your trade did have a registry office, and now I'm going to show you the machinery I promised, the enforcement engine, the thing that made all this silence hold, because it was not loyalty, whatever the memoirs of the ladies said, and it was not love, whatever the ladies hoped. It was a piece of paper, the character, the written reference, 1 page in the mistress's own hand, honest, sober, industrious, leaves of her own accord. Without it, you did not exist. No agency would list you, no house would board you. The law of this arrangement was perfectly simple and perfectly one-sided. A mistress could refuse a character entirely, for any reason, for no reason, and there was no appeal on earth. 12 years of your labour lived or died in one woman's morning mood. That is the true wage relation of the Avenue. They held the pen, and the pen was a hinge your whole life swung on. Servants in this city called a bad character the Black Mark, and a refused character had a grimmer name still. They called it being sent out naked. Every servant on Fifth Avenue kept that fact where you keep the pawn ticket, sewn in flat, out of sight, pressing on the skin. And where the pen met the market, that was the registry office. And the registry office is where this story goes next. On a raw Thursday in late March, on your afternoon out, because Annie Duffy has decided to better herself. Picture the place. Every servant in New York could take you there blindfolded. A second-floor office off 6th Avenue above a milliner's, a stove, a railing, a bench, and behind the desk a woman in grey with steel spectacles, and a ledger the size of a tombstone, in which is written, in her cramped priced hand, the below-stairs census of the better half of Manhattan. Who wants a parlour maid and won't pay over $16? Which house on Madison has had 4 cooks in a year, and why? And the why is written in a private shorthand of 2 or 3 dreadful little words. Which butler drinks, which master's hands wander, and which houses a girl should not be sent to at any wage. And the good offices kept that last list faithfully. It was the one mercy of the system, and the bad offices sold girls to those houses anyway at $1 a head. And both kinds of office are documented to the rafters in the reform commissions that investigated the trade. The bench along the wall is the truest furniture in New York. On it that Thursday, 2 Swedish girls fresh off the boat with their boxes at their feet. A cook of 50 with beautiful references and arthritic knuckles she keeps in her muff, because knuckles are inspected. A nursemaid crying quietly and steadily, like weather, whose lady turned her off without a character for an impertinence nobody will ever define. You sit beside Annie and you feel it come off the whole bench like heat off the kitchen range. Everything on this street is held up by people who can be dropped through the floor with one withheld page. Annie, though. Annie goes to the railing like a woman boarding a train she has chosen. She has 14 years of characters in a flat oilcloth wallet, and a head for wages like a broker's for stock. And she lays out her terms, housekeeper's post or head of staff in a smaller establishment, $30, no basement bedroom. The woman in grey looks over her spectacles, the look that has melted 1,000 housemaids. And Annie gives it straight back with 6pence of interest, and the woman almost smiles, and writes her into the tombstone ledger, and says there is a widower's household on 36th Street, staff of 5, that wants precisely her articles. Walking home up the darkening avenue, arm in arm against the wind, Annie is lit like a lamp. Head of staff Nora, my own keys, my own room with my own fire, and no one over me but himself, and he's never home. Then she looks at you sideways, and her voice drops into the register the basement saves for truth. Come with me some day, not to 36th Street, out. You've the savings, I know you have. You've had the bank book since Cleveland was president. A boarding house, the 2 of us. Respectable rooms for respectable women. You'd keep the books and I'd keep order, and we'd sleep past 6 in our own beds in our own house, and nobody's bell in the wall. Nobody's bell in the wall. You're 30 years old, and you have $1,140 in the Emigrant Industrial Savings Bank, passbook in the tin box, 12 years of standing very still, and when she says it, I'll tell you exactly what happens because it matters later. Something in your chest lifts and turns over, like a sheet shaken out in the sun. Someday, you say. Someday, Annie says, and squeezes your arm and lets it go. Because you have both lived long enough below stairs to know what someday is worth on the open market. And neither of you knows. How could you? That before the year is out, a man at an area railing is going to put an exact cash price on that word, and you're going to have to look at the number in his hand and choose. Annie gave her month's notice on the 1st of April. Mrs. Byrne read the notice, looked at her for a long moment over it, and said, "You'll do, Duffy. God help the man's household." From Mrs. Byrne this was a triumphal arch. The staff gave her a send-off in the servants' hall with one of Albert's cakes and a sherry that was strictly speaking the house's, and Cook cried, and the scullery girl cried because Cook was crying, and on the last morning Annie stripped her iron bed, boxed her life, shook your hand like a man, and went down the area steps and 11 blocks south into her own story. And her bed stood empty across your attic room. And I want you to notice, the way you noticed every night that spring, how loud a room is when it holds one breath instead of two. She left you 2 things, a promise of Sundays, and laid on your pillow like a joke and not a joke, her spare door key from the old country, iron big as a spoon to hold. She said, "Against the house will keep yet." It went into the tin box on top of the grey ribbon. The box was filling. Boxes do. But now I have to wind the calendar back 10 days because I've kept a day from you on purpose. I wanted you to understand the machinery first, the characters, the registry, the ledger of who may work and who may starve. Before I showed you the afternoon, the machinery caught fire in front of the whole city. The 17th of March, 1899, St. Patrick's Day. This one is not composite. This one has a date and a death toll and a smell that stayed in the avenue's curtains for a month. St. Patrick's Day was the one day of the year the avenue belonged to the basements. Understand what that meant. The servant class of New York was Irish, the way the harbour was salt. The census men counted decade after decade and found the single largest occupation of Irish-born women in America was service. Tens of thousands of Bridgets and Noras and Annies in this one city, carrying this one city's trays. And on the 17th of March, the parade came up Fifth Avenue itself, fife and drum, the 69th Regiment with their rifles shouldered, the ancient order of Hibernians in sashes, and the sidewalks filled with every off-duty maid and groom and useful man in Manhattan, standing for once on the front side of the railings, watching their own march past the houses they polished. Mrs. Byrne gave the afternoon generously. She was Galway before she was anything. And you and Charlie and the scullery girl walked up the avenue in the raw, bright cold to watch, with the green ribbon Annie had pinned to your coat before she left for her new place, saying she'd be watching from 36th Street with her new household's parlour maid. You stood at 46th Street, packed in the crowd, opposite the Windsor Hotel. You knew the Windsor the way the basement knows everything, from below. 7 stories of brick and brownstone filling the block front between 46th and 47th. One of the grand old hotels of the avenue, home to millionaires who preferred suites to houses. Girls you knew worked there. A chambermaid called herself lucky to get the Windsor. Good floors, steady tips, a servants' hall with meat twice a day. Charlie was in the middle of telling you, over the drums, what the Windsor's second cook had told him about a Sultan's agent on the 5th floor who kept his own coffee maker, when the man beside you said, in the mild voice of a man remarking on weather, "That's smoke." At first it was almost nothing, a grey feather out of a second-floor window lost against the March sky. The story that came out at the inquest, and I give it to you as the inquest gave it, was small enough to break your heart. A guest by an open parlour window, a lit match tossed, a lace curtain in a draught, lace, then silk portieres, then varnished panelling, then the open stairwells and elevator shaft pulling the fire up through the building like breath up a chimney. The Windsor went from a feather of smoke to a furnace in about 15 minutes. I need you to understand that number. 15 minutes in the middle of the afternoon on the most watched street in America with a parade going by. What you remember is not one picture but a stack of them, shuffled forever. The parade music stumbling section by section as the marchers saw. A fife dying mid-phrase like a bird hitting glass. The crowd's single sound. Thousands of throats finding one low note together. Windows opening high up and figures in them. And the things they threw first. Bedding. A dressing case that burst on the pavement like a shot bird. Jewels. Someone's jewels. Raining loose into Fifth Avenue. And then, when the fire reached the rooms behind them, not things. People stood on those sills 70 feet up, with the safety ropes the hotel kept coiled by each window. That was the Windsor's fire equipment, ropes knotted every 2 feet, and some slid and lost the rope at the 3rd floor, and some never took hold of it at all, and the crowd below screamed at them to wait for the ladders, and the ladders reached to the 6th floor and the fire did not wait. You saw a woman shake her head at that height quite clearly, quite calmly, as if declining a dance. You did not see her again. The scullery girl's face was pressed into your coat by then, your hand on the back of her head, your other arm around Charlie's, and Charlie, quick, amusing Charlie, stood with tears running down his face in perfect silence. And that is when you learned what Charlie's face looked like with nothing performing on it. Within 2 hours, the Windsor Hotel did not exist. Walls came down into the avenue with a sound you felt in your back teeth. The papers by evening were calling the count anywhere from 40 to 90 dead. And here is a terrible true thing. The count never settled. To this day it never settled, because a hotel's registry burns with the hotel, and because, write this on the Century's account, nobody could say exactly how many servants had been inside. The guests were named in the papers, column after column, with their fortunes attached. The chambermaids and laundresses and pantry girls who died in the top floors, where the staff rooms were, under the roof, where the heat goes, where you sleep, Nora. They were listed, when they were listed at all, as domestics, names unknown. The wife of the hotel's own proprietor died, and his daughter, that made every front page in America. The girls in the attic made the estimates. You walked home down the avenue in the smoke-smelling dusk, the 3 of you, through a crowd gone quiet as a church, past the great houses standing with their lamps coming on, marble and plate glass, and not one of them. You thought it that night, and it is simply true. Not one of them built to be gotten out of from the top floor where the boxes and the maids are kept. And Mrs. Byrne met the staff at the area door and counted you in with her eyes, every head like a shepherd, and said nothing at all except to the scullery girl, "There's cocoa on the range. Below stairs food again. doing the talking. That night, the basement was full and warm and nobody chaffed anybody, and Cook made griddle cakes at 10 o'clock for no reason. And if you have ever kept a vigil with this channel among hotel maids on other nights, you knew, without being told, where every servant's mind in that kitchen was. 5 blocks north, in the wet black ruin, where girls with their own tin boxes had lived over their work the same as you. And then, give the century its due, it never missed a collection day. Then the fire became copy. Because 1899 was the high noon of a kind of newspaper this country had never seen before, and I want to introduce it properly, since it is about to walk into your life through the area railing. The Yellow Press. Mr. Hearst's Journal and Mr. Pulitzer's World. 1,000,000 copy papers at a penny each. Locked in a circulation war, they fought with headlines the size of your forearm, and their great discovery, the discovery that built those empires, was that the reading public of America had an appetite without a flaw for one dish above all, the private lives of the rich. The Sunday supplements ran society's secrets the way other pages ran shipping news, and after the Windsor burned, with its cargo of millionaires and its safe deposit vaults full of melted jewels, the reporters came up the avenue like gulls after a plough, and they had learned, this is documented, this is the panic I promised you at the start, they had learned exactly where the doors of the great houses were thinnest. Not the front doors, the area doors. It had names, this little industry. The society papers had been paying for years. Town Topics, the weekly that all Fifth Avenue read with its door locked, was famous for it, and was blackmailing half the 400 into subscriptions of a fatness the courts would eventually get to hear about. All of it in the Record. Butlers were on retainers. Discharged maids sold their notice fortnights. A coachman's memory of one carriage ride could be worth a month of his wages. The great houses knew it, and the panic below their politeness in these exact years was real enough that families changed how they spoke at their own tables. The etiquette writers of the 90s began advising in cold print that nothing of consequence be said before the servants, and the servants noticed, and the dinner tables of the avenue went brittle with French phrases and spelled out words, as if the basement had not been hearing French and spelling both for a generation. 11 days after the fire, on your Sunday out, a man fell into step beside you on 6th Avenue, matching your pace exactly, hat lifted exactly right. Miss Devlin, isn't it? Not a question. He had a pleasant, freckled, forgettable face, and very good boots for a man in a cheap coat, and he introduced himself as Mr. Considine of the press, and he'll not trouble you a minute. He was writing, he said, about the Windsor girls, the domestics, names unknown. A shame, he said, and his voice on the word was, mind this, genuinely warm. Would she believe the paper couldn't establish so much as a list of them? Now, a woman in her position, in service on the avenue, knowing the hotels girls, the registries, the boarding houses. And here is the trap laid so kindly you must watch it twice to see it. The first thing he asked you for was good, names for the nameless. 10 minutes of talk, and the dead girls of the Windsor's attic get their column at last with their Christian names in it. And $20, he said it as if remembering a trifle. $20 for your Sunday trouble. Nearly a month of you for 10 minutes, for a kindness. You stopped walking. 12 years in service teaches you to read a man's boots, and his boots said the cheap coat was a costume, and something under your breastbone said, quiet and certain as Mrs. B. and the first payment is the only one that's ever for a kindness. It buys the second conversation. The second one is the trade. "I'm sorry for these girls," you said, and meant it to the floor of yourself. "I've nothing to sell." "To sell," said Mr. Considine, delighted, as if you'd dealt him a good card. He put his card into your basket, onto your mending light as a dropped leaf, and lifted his hat. "Nobody ever does the first time," he said. "Good day, Miss Devlin." You did not tell Mrs. Byrne. Mind that too. You told yourself there was nothing to tell. A man walked beside you on a public street, a card in a basket, nothing. But that night you put his card not in the range fire, but in the tin box, under Annie's iron key, the way you'd keep the first cough of a fever, to compare against the next one. Some part of you below the part that talks already knew there would be a next one. "That's the trade," Mrs. Byrne says. "She is right about everything else. We shall see what she is worth against a man with a cheque-book, because spring was over, the house was about to empty for the summer, and the next time Mr. Considine found you, the number would have a naught on the end of it. First, though, the season had to finish, and the season finished the way it always finished, with the balls of April, and the balls are where I can show you the last of the things the servants knew, the weather inside the marriages, because a ball from below stairs is not a dance. It is a fleet exercise, and the servants are the signal flags. Watch one evening of it from your station. Mrs. Fairley, dressed and armoured, and gone by 10 to the Delancey ball, armour on, 7th stone touched, the words worn so smooth by now they're hardly words. And in the cloakroom of that house, and in every cloakroom of every great house that season, the ladies' maids and the visiting footmen stand along the walls, waiting out the music, and the waiting servants of Fifth Avenue constitute, all together, one single distributed instrument that misses nothing. Who came in, whose carriage? Who left the floor during the cotillion, and how long the conservatory door stayed shut? Which married lady's fan a certain gentleman carried through 2 rooms, which is nothing, and which he carried through 3, which is not nothing. The servants did not gossip about this the way the yellow papers gossiped. That is the distinction this whole story rests on, so let me set it down carefully. Upstairs called it scandal. The papers called it copy. Below stairs it was operational information. A coachman needed to know how long to walk the horses. A maid needed to know whether to expect her lady home wound tight or loosened, at 1 or at 4, weeping or humming. The basements assembled night by night a complete working map of every attachment on the avenue, who loved where they shouldn't, who was loved back, who only watched, not to expose the dance but to move furniture around it. And nothing in that map was ever staged for effect, because the map was not for anyone. It was the sea the second house swam in. There were marriages that decade held together, functionally, by the perfect coordinated tact of about 11 servants who never once discussed it in plain words. Nobody thanked them. Thanks would have required admitting the map existed. And at 4 in the morning, after such a ball, when the last carriage had rolled and the great room stood wrecked like a beach at low tide, the ballroom's own people went in with their brooms, and if you've spent one of our other nights sweeping candle wax and crushed camellias out of a parquet dawn, you know precisely which regiment of this same army they were. It was in the last week of the season, at the very end of April, that Charlie sold his sentence. 1 sentence. I want to be exact about the size of it, because the size is the lesson. There was a house across the avenue. I'll call them the Varricks, and remember the bargain of this channel. The family is stitched from 3 real ones, and the machinery around them is documented to the bolt heads, whose eldest son's engagement to a copper heiress the papers loved had died quietly that winter. merely died. These things happened. The flowers stop, the cards stop, silence closes over. But why it died was a below-stairs fact, and the why was pitiable and human, and none of the reading public's earthly business, and the Varick's own people had kept it buttoned all season, which tells you they were a good basement. Charlie knew the why, because Charlie collected knowing the way the butler collected candle ends. It was his private wealth, his one pile. And on a night off, in a saloon on 3rd Avenue, in that hour when beer and audience turn a young man's one pile into a bonfire, Charlie told a man. Told, mined, not sold. The money, a $10 piece for the detail, was pressed on him after, laughing, the way you'd tip a singer. And the man was one of Considine's tribe, and the Sunday world ran the why, dressed in almosts and it is saids, recognisable to every drawing room and every pantry on the avenue in one reading. Nobody upstairs ever knew it was Charlie. Understand that. No Fairley, no Varick, no lady with a lorgnette ever traced it. The people who traced it, inside 4 days, by the same instrument that maps cotillions, were the basements. The Varick's first footman had been 3 feet away in that saloon, and what happened next is the part I most need you to see, because the great houses always believed the silence of their servants was enforced from above by the character and the black mark, and here is the truth. The pen upstairs was only the 2nd court. The 1st court sat at the servants' tables of the avenue, and it moved faster, and there was no appeal there either. The word went down the telegraph, and Charlie was out. Not dismissed. The Fairleys never knew there was anything to dismiss him for. Frozen. At the servants' balls no one stood up with him. At the area doors where he'd been fed pie and gossip in every kitchen for 8 blocks, the pie stopped and the gossip stopped with it. And for a footman the gossip is the job. A footman who hears nothing is furniture. Visiting valleys looked through him. The registry office woman in grey, who hears everything, who is the Telegraph Central Exchange, drew, you may be sure, a small mark of her own in the tombstone ledger. And in June, Charlie gave his notice with a white face and took a place in Chicago. A good place, tall as ever, references in order, and shook your hand at the area gate and tried twice to say something that wasn't amusing, and managed, on the 2nd try. It was 1 sentence, Nora. "It's a trade, Charlie," you said gently, because there was no gentler true thing in stock. You made the other one. Watch him go down the avenue with his box on his shoulder. 22 years old. That is what the discretion economy did to its own defaulters, without one word written down, and every servant who watched him go, you included, Nora, you first of all, filed the lesson where the pawn ticket lives, against the skin. Then June came, and the family went to Newport, and the house did the strangest thing a house can do. It closed its eyes. The avenue emptied every summer like a tide going out. The 400 to their cottages, which had 70 rooms. The shutters up and down the street latched over plate glass, and in each great house a skeleton staff stayed behind in the dim, and this year the skeleton was Mrs. Byrne, the useful man, the scullery girl, and you, kept back to see the wardrobe and the linen through the summer, while Madame took a French maid services with the Newport house. 4 people in 30 rooms, and the 30 rooms sheeted. I could put you to sleep with the summer house alone, and I half intend to. Holland covers over every chair and sofa, pale grey-white, so the rooms stand full of patient ghosts. The chandeliers bagged in muslin like great wasps' nests. Carpets up, floors dark and bare and cool, and your steps ringing where all winter the pile drank every footfall, Straw down over the marble in the hall. The clocks let run down, one by one. Mrs. Byrne stops winding them herself deliberately, keeping only the kitchen clock alive, and for 3 months the house has one heartbeat, and it is downstairs, which you privately think is where it always was. The smell changes. No flowers, no beeswax burning, no violet powder, just cool stone, camphor from the furs in their cedar closet, tobacco leaf and pepper laid among the woolens against moth, and the brown paper smell of sunlight coming through drawn Holland blinds all day into rooms nobody enters. And the work, because there is always the work, turns archaeological. This is when the house is audited every summer by the only people who know what it actually contains. You and Mrs. Byrne go through the linen, 406 pieces, counted against the book, these sides to middled sheets holding their seams. Through the plate with the butler's summer lists, 312 pieces counted twice. Through Madam's wardrobe camphored and hung in muslin shrouds, 51 gowns. You know each one the way a groom knows his string by shoulder and temper, and through it all Mrs. Byrne's economies keep their quiet books. The second-grade coal ordered early for autumn at July's price. The drawing-room silk that should go to the upholsterer, and instead gets your needle and 3 francs worth of matched thread, invisible unless you know, and you know. The Fairley money is thin this year. The basement has known it since January. The basement mends around it, stitch by stitch, sides to middle, and Newport never hears a thread of it. Sundays you have Annie. That was the summer's wage that mattered. Her widower's household keeps city hours all July. So Sunday afternoons the two of you take the 6th Avenue elevated south. 5 cents, wicker seats, the hot wind full of cinders and river, and walk in Central Park with the whole off-duty servant class of New York, the nurses and the grooms and the parlour maids, everyone's one afternoon moving under the same trees. Annie is thriving. Her keys jingle in her talk. The boarding house has moved in her mouth from some day to a street. She has her eye on Brooklyn near the bridge train's 11 rooms, and she has costed it. 8 boarders at $5 the week is $40, rent $22, and she says your 1,100 banked and her 7 would furnish it and float the first quarter, and she has started calling it the house, as if it existed, as if it were only waiting. The way America was once only a word in Monaghan that turned out to be an actual place with actual gangplanks. Next spring, Nora, when the season's out, give your notice at Easter. The plane trees go by overhead. Somebody's baby, somebody else's baby, laughs at a dog. You're 30 years old, and your feet this one afternoon a week do not hurt. Easter, you say, and this time, mark it. You don't say someday. And it was on one of those Sundays, the last one of August, with the family still at Newport and the avenue still shuttered, and your guard, let us be honest, half down and folded in a summer drawer, that a pleasant freckled man fell into step beside you at the park gate as if resuming a sentence and said, "Miss Devlin, you'll be glad to know I found the Windsor girls' names, most of them. The paper ran them in June, no thanks to anybody on your street." A beat, exactly the length of decency. Now, the Fairleys keep their townhouse open all summer with a staff of 4, which is thrifty, and Tiffany's has had a certain necklace being reset since January, which is very slow, even for Tiffany's, or my paper would pay $75 for an hour on the general subject of economy. General mind, nothing that would ever wear your name. 3 months of your life for 1 hour at a park gate, with nobody on earth watching. And I will tell you the truth about this moment, because a story that pretends its heroine's heart is marble will put nobody honestly to sleep. You thought about the house in Brooklyn for the length of one breath, in the time it takes a plane leaf to turn over in the wind. $75 stood in front of you wearing 11 rooms and a door with Annie's iron key in it, and the breath went out, and what was left standing was Ian, who had just shown you he'd spent 5 months learning your mistress's jeweller. You knew about Tiffany's, you said, and you printed the Windsor Girls in June, so you know how to find things and you know how to wait. I'll remember both. Good afternoon, Mr. Considine, he laughed. Delighted again, damn him, like a man watching a horse he's backed clear a fence, and lifted his hat, and was a stranger in the crowd in 4 steps. That evening the card went back into the tin box, joined now by a second one, identical. You sat on your iron bed a long time with the box open on your knees. 2 cards, a fever, coughing twice. This time you told Mrs. Byrne. She heard you out in her parlour with the door shut, hands folded on the linen book, face doing what her face does, which is nothing, and when you had finished, the fire, the park gate, 20 and then 75, both cards laid on her table like evidence, which is what they were. She was quiet for a while. The kitchen clock came through the wall. Then she said something you did not expect. I had my man in 81. Mine was from the Tribune of all papers, and he wanted the inside of a divorce, and he offered me $40, which was 5 months then. She turned one of the cards over with a forefinger, the way you'd turn something found on a kitchen floor. I'll tell you what I learned, and you'll keep it. Never be insulted, never be frightened, and never, this is the whole of it, Nora, never let him teach you to think in his prices. He'll come again. A man like this prices a house like a burglar, low first to learn the locks. The figure will get worse, and the evening it gets truly bad, the evening it turns into money you could feel in your sleep, that evening come to me before you answer him anything at all, not because I doubt you. She looked up then, and for the second time in your life you saw all the way down that well. 'Cause no one should have to be the only person in a house holding a number like that. That weight is what they think they pay us for. They have never once paid us for it. Then she made tea, which from Mrs. Byrne was an embrace with full military honours, and you drank it, and the 2 cards went into the range fire after all. Her decision, executed with a poker with prejudice. The box under your bed, she said, is for things that are yours. September brought the family home, brown from Newport and no richer, and brought the city the biggest party it had ever thrown. And I will let you see it the way you actually saw it, because the way you actually saw it is the best seat in this whole story. The last days of September, 1899, Admiral George Dewey, the hero of Manila Bay, 17 months' worth of headline, came home at last, and New York lost its mind on a civic scale. This is record, all of it, dated to the day. On the 29th, the naval parade, the white warships coming up the Hudson through a harbour gone solid with craft. And on the 30th Saturday, the land parade. 30,000 marchers, soldiers and sailors and the Olympia's own crews, hours of them, down a route hung in so much bunting, the building seemed dressed for their own wedding, under a plaster and staff triumphal arch at Madison Square, built for the occasion in the style of Rome, 100 feet of it, with Victory driving her seahorses on top. 2 million people stood in the streets of New York those 2 days. The papers said so, and for once the papers hardly needed to exaggerate. The Fairleys saw it from a friend's window on the route by engraved invitation. The basement saw it from somewhere better, The roof. Every great house on the avenue had its flat-leaded acre up behind the cornice, where the laundry lines ran and the water tanks sat, and on that Saturday, by ancient unwritten custom and Mrs. Burns' nod, the staff went up. Albert carried up a hamper, the accent stayed downstairs, and cook came, groaning at every flight and glad of it, and the scullery girl and Prewit with his pipe, and the useful man, and you. And from up there, Nora, stand at the parapet a minute, because you will keep this the rest of your life. From up there you got the one thing servants are never issued, the view. The city lies out flat and glittering to the rivers, both rivers, silver on the left hand and silver on the right, and between them Manhattan smokes and shines like something just forged. South, the office towers stand up from downtown. 15 stories, 20, the new steel-bone kind, and more scaffolding beside them. This skyline is a bar chart of money, and it is being redrawn while you watch. The harbour beyond stitched white with wakes. North, the park like green bays on a billiard table, and beyond it the raw new blocks going up. And below, straight down past 5 stories of window ledges you have leaned out of to clean, Fifth Avenue runs black with people. Solid, bank to bank, a river of hats, and the sound comes up to the roof the way surf comes over a dune, in long breathing rolls. And when the white head of the column swings up the avenue, the roar travels along with it like something pulled on a rope, and the scullery girl stands on the parapet base with Cook's fist locked in her waistband and shrieks herself, hoarse, and even Prewit takes the pipe out of his mouth. And you stand at the rail in the bright wind with the bunting cracking below you, and you think the thought, you would not be you, and this would not be the channel it is if the thought did not come. Every window on this avenue that those 2 million people are cheering under, you and yours wash. The flags snapping from the cornices were hauled up by useful men before 6 this morning. The great families in the reviewing stands were laced and shaved and breakfasted into public shape by an invisible regiment that is standing, right now, on the rooftops over the whole route, on the servants' level, above everybody, seeing the whole machine at once. The fleet, the crowd, the money, the marble, the smoke, the way nobody in the street or the stands can see it. You are a cog, girl. Never think otherwise. The century doesn't pay cogs to think otherwise. But you are a cog standing on top of the engine, and there is not a millionaire on the route who has ever once seen his own city, the way his laundress sees it every Monday from the roof. They cheer him for sinking a fleet, says Mrs. Byrne at your elbow, meaning Dewey, her eyes on the white uniforms far below. I'd cheer any one of them could get a season's soot out of table linen. Albert laughs so hard he sits down on the tank platform, and the wind takes the wrapping papers, and far downtown the guns of the salute go thudding into the blue like someone beating a carpet the size of the sky. Hold the roof a moment longer, smell the roast chicken and the pipe smoke and the cold, sweet wind. This is the top of the year, the crest of it, everyone fed and shouting and nobody's bell ringing. Stories about houses like this one always keep such an afternoon somewhere in the middle, the way the house keeps its one warm room. Now come down the ladder stair, because it is October when you touch the landing, the season is beginning, and the pleasant freckled man has finished learning the locks. He took you at your marketing of all places, mid-morning 3rd Avenue, you with the fish list in your glove, because with Madam's economies you did errands now a lady's maid strictly shouldn't. And there was no hat lift this time and no Parkgate pleasantry. He walked half a block in silence first, which was new, and it occurred to you, in the way you notice a change of light, that the silence was the message. He wanted you to feel how patient he had been all year, so you would understand that the patience was ending. Then, conversationally watching the traffic and not you, number 1104, 4 steps. Your face held, because your face is professional, but a wagon horse tossed in its blinkers beside you, and for one white second the street sounded very far away. The ticket. The blue card sewn under the spools that no living soul had seen written but a clerk in a green eyeshade. I see the loan office keeps better confidence than I thought, you said, when you'd brought your voice back. Since you're guessing. I never guess, it costs circulation. He said it without vanity, like a plumber naming his union. The clerk didn't sell it, if that eases you. Clerks are dull. It's the runners who collect the interest that see the ledgers, and runners are thirsty. Here is where we are, Miss Devlin. My paper is preparing its winter reading. Fifth Avenue's economies, the season on tick, the copies at the collarbones of the 400, the great fronts and what's behind them. It runs with or without you. The runners and the discharged and the tradesmen's books have given me the skeleton. What I am buying now is the walk of it, the voice, how the thing is lived from the woman who carries it. $200 for the general picture, no names in your mouth required. I have the names. He stopped and faced you. And the freckled pleasantness stood aside for one honest moment, which was somehow the worst thing yet. And I'll tell you what I know you already know, because you're the intelligent kind, which is the only kind worth bribing. The names I do print, when I print one, that house doesn't dine out the next season. It leaves. Newport first, then abroad, then the name is a street they rename. My paper calls it news. You'd call it what the fire did to the Windsor, only slower and in print, and nobody jumps, they just stop being asked. 200, Miss Devlin, 8 months of you, to help me be accurate. To help me be accurate. Remember, at the beginning of this night, I told you the men who did the offering were real, and the trade was real, and the panic was real. I want you to notice that at no point in this year has Mr. Considine once lied to you. That is what made his kind dangerous. The devil of the yellow decade did not trade in lies. Lies were the amateur's market. He traded in true things told to 2 million people at breakfast. No, you said. Not yet, he agreed, pleasantly, the pleasantness back in harness. And named, this was his parting gift, dropped like a coin in a blind man's cup. The date of the Fairleys' December dinner, the big one, the one whose invitations had not yet been engraved. Season's compliments to the house, he said, and left you holding a fish list on 3rd Avenue, in the smell of ice and sawdust, doing the one thing Mrs. Byrne had forbidden, thinking in his prices. November was the tightening. You felt it in the house the way you feel weather in a knee. The season opened brilliant and brittle. The horse show at the garden the 3rd week of November, the avenue's carriages nose to tail, everyone appraising everyone's everything. And the Fairley finances entered that stage of a long illness where the economies themselves need economies. You knew the December dinner mattered beyond dinners because of what came back, the Riviere. On the 4th of the month, Madam sent you to Union Square with a banker's envelope. Newport had been let go early, the bay mare sold, a railway dividend had limped in at last, and you redeemed ticket 1104, 11 months' interest paid in full, and carried $40,000 home in a rush basket under mended stockings. And that night you did the test one more time. Lip to the 7th stone, cold as well water, true. The false necklace went into the back of the safe like an actress released from a long run. The performance was to be genuine now, throat included, because the December dinner was the Fairlie's answer to a season of whispers, and on this street you refute rumour with candlelight. 26 covers. The 12th of December, 1899. The house worked for a week like a yard fitting out a ship, and you need the below decks of it to feel the night properly. Albert building the menu like a fortification, 8 courses, terrapin and canvas backs again because tradition is armour too. The plate up from the vaults, all 312 pieces counted and the borrowed second butler drilled. The florist's men filling the stair with smilax and American beauties at $1 the stem. Economies have theatres of their own, 60 pounds of ice sculpted, the bells tested, the 24 bells all answering. And above it, in the dressing room that is your parade ground, the full dress of the line, the new gown, white peau de soie, the last worth Madame will order for 3 years, though neither of you says so, and the hair taking its 104 pins, and the riviere the true one, going around her throat under your hands for the first time since the 2nd of January. She looked at it in the glass a long moment, then she touched the 7th stone, and here, at last, she caught herself doing it, watched her own finger on it in the mirror, and said, in the flat voice, but slower than you had ever heard the flat voice go, "You always know which is which, don't you, Nora?" The room went very still, the way the avenue goes still under new snow. It was not a question about diamonds. You both knew it was not a question about diamonds. It stood in the doorway of being a question about everything. The trays, the tradesmen, the corridor of separate fires, the year. And if she asked everything, you would have to answer something, and the house of glass would have to hear its own name at last. "It's my work to know, madam," you said. "It goes no further than my work." 1 breath. 2. In the mirror her eyes finished their arithmetic. She was, whatever else this year has shown you, the best accountant in the family. And she chose, the way her whole class chose, the way the whole gilded street chose every single night of its existence. The performance, with full knowledge, eyes open, armour on. "No," she said, "I don't suppose it does." And stood, and the peau de soie fell into its lined with the sound of the sea, and she said, armour on so quietly it was bookkeeping, and went down to her 26 guests, and was. The papers said it themselves that week in the column that never knew how right it was. Radiant. He was at the area railing when you came up the steps for air at 11. You knew he would be. That was his gift and his poison both. By December, you understood his calendar better than the parishes. The airs from the ballroom came down faint through the area. The hired orchestra, Strauss gone soft through stone, and the railing was cold enough to burn through your shawl where you gripped it. And Mr. Considine stood in the lamplight in his good boots with his collar up, and laid, on the flat top of the railing post between his glove and yours, an envelope. 500, he said. Nothing pleasant tonight. The pleasantness had done its work and been dismissed. And listen to the rest before your face answers, because this is the last time I come, and I've learned what you are, so I've brought the true offer under the money. My paper wants the winter piece, but what I want, and this was the strangest minute of your year, because his voice saying it was the voice a man uses about his own life, is the book, 12 years, 3 houses, the whole below stairs of the gilded street. Your name on it, or no name, as you please. Serialized first. The world paid a butler's wife $8,000 for less last year, and it read like a laundry list. Yours wouldn't. I've heard you talk twice. You see everything, and you got out of the habit of lying to yourself. That's a writer, Miss Devlin. That's the whole trade. $10,000. Your Brooklyn house free and clear, and your friend in it by Easter, and no bell in any wall of it, and every word true. I'd not print one false line. I'd have no need. That's the offer. The truth, told by the only class in America that knows all of it, and you paid for once in your life what knowledge is worth. And his knuckle tapped the envelope, and your knees. I promised you this at the beginning of the night, a year ago, 5 floors of this story ago. Your knees went loose, and you held the frozen railing like a woman at a ship's rail, because 500 was 20 months. But the book was the whole ledger of your life paid off at par. The house, Annie's key turning in an actual door, your name, your own name, Nora Devlin, who has been the maid in every room she ever stood in, printed on a thing that existed. He had not offered you money at the end. He had offered you existence. It is the only bid the discretion economy cannot laugh at. Above you, through the glass over the area door, the light of the house you had held up all year lay yellow on the frost. You want to know what decided it. Not loyalty. Mrs. Byrne is right. They never paid for the weight, and no wage on earth buys what the basements carry. Not fear. He'd have protected his source, his kind always did. That much was professional religion. I'll tell you what decided it, because you told it to the railing, and the railing kept it, and now, tonight, after everything, it can go to you, listener, whom none of this can hurt. It was the counting. 12, 13, 14. A woman's pulse under your fingers and her drops falling into a glass and her eyes coming up. You won't speak of it. All the rooms of all 3 houses came to the railing at once. Every midnight confession, every tray that told, every marriage mapped, every bottle wrapped like a wound. And every one of them had been handed to you the same way, not given, leaned on you, the way weight leans on a wall, because a wall is what you were hired to be. And the wall had been, for 12 years, the one thing on this street that was exactly what it looked like. Sell it as truth, and it would all be true, every line. And the truth of a wall that talks is a lie about every room it ever stood in. There would be no wall left anywhere for anyone in the only world you had. And the women who leaned, the counting one, the radiant accountant upstairs, the ones the century had already half crushed politely, they would be, in 10,000 true words, at breakfast for 2 million strangers, what the Windsor girls were to the crowd, figures at windows. No, you said, not at 500, not at 10,000, Mr. Considine. There's no number because it isn't mine to sell. It was never told to me. It was only kept near me. Print your winter piece from your runners and your ledgers. I know you will, and I know it'll be true, and God help us all. But you'll write it standing in the street. Nobody who was inside will hold the door for you. Good night. He looked at you for a long moment, in the lamplight, in the cold, with the waltz coming up through the stones, and then he did the last thing in the world you expected of the yellow decade. He took the envelope back off the railing and put it away, and lifted his hat all the way, not the businesslike inch, the whole arc, the salute, and said, "They'll never know what they had in their attic. That's your epitaph, Miss Devlin, and there's not a name on my street that will get a better one," and walked off north up the frozen avenue, collar up, quick and light, out of the lamplight, out of your year, and so far as the record of your life runs, kept your name out of everything he ever wrote after, which was, from inside his trade, his own kind of ruinous payment made in his own forbidden coin. The winter piece ran the third Sunday of January 1900. 6 columns. Paced at famous throats. Seasons on credit. A great house's grocer carrying $1,100. All of it dressed in a certain avenue, and it is whispered. All of it true, none of it fairly by name, though 3 of its details wore this house's measurements. The avenue read it behind locked doors, and the basements read it over the avenue's shoulder, and for a fortnight every area door on the street was a checkpoint, and every mistress reread her maid's face like a lease. Mrs. Fairley never once looked at you with a question in her eyes. Whatever she had settled at the Mirror on the 12th of December, it stayed settled, and that, from her, in that fortnight, was the only wage of the year that was paid in your own coin. Mrs. Byrne called the staff into the servants' hall, all 13, read the 6 columns aloud herself, top to bottom, in a voice like a coroner, and folded the paper, and said, "Whoever fed it doesn't eat at any table of mine on this earth, and whoever didn't, and I know my house, so that's the lot of you. You'll oblige me by remembering this the day some clever man with good boots tells you knowledge is money." She looked just once at you. It isn't. Money is money. Knowledge is weight. And the pay for carrying weight decently was never coin, and it never will be. It's that the roof stands. The roof stood, and the household you had refused a fortune to protect never knew, not that night, not that winter, not ever, that its ruin had stood at the area railing 4 times in 1 year, in a good coat, holding an envelope. You had that knowledge now too. Into the box it went, with all the rest. It is the strangest thing a person can own. A disaster that didn't happen. It weighs nothing at all, and you carry it forever. And now the story can slow down, because the year is spent, and the house has held, and everything after this is the long exhale. Between the dinner and the newsprint there had been one more midnight worth keeping, and you kept it on the area steps, of all places, wrapped in Annie's old shawl. The 31st of December, 1899. The century turned over New York like a great ship coming about. Every bell in the city, every steam whistle on both rivers, the ferries and the liners and the tugs all crying at once in the dark, and rockets standing up off the harbour, and along the avenue the front doors of the great houses opened, and the quality stood on their own steps in their furs with glasses in their hands, and below them, at the area railings, the basements came up into the cold to hear it too, so that for one strange quarter of an hour the whole street stood outside together, upstairs and downstairs, first house and second house, arranged on their separate steps in the same night air, listening to the same bells, and nobody served anybody anything. The scullery girl fell asleep against your arm before the noise was done, worn out by wonder, and you stood very still so as not to wake her, the way you had stood very still for 12 years, only this once it was easy, this once it cost nothing at all, and over the rooftops the sky flushed and boomed, and 1899 let go of the world. You do not yet know. Nobody on either flight of steps knows, and I will not spoil it for them, standing there in their moment with their glasses raised, what the new number in the date is bringing. Let them have the bells. You will know soon enough, all of you. The listener knows already, and can keep it kindly to himself like a servant. The rest of that winter went by, the way rebuilt trust goes by, slowly and then ordinarily. The fortnight of locked doors after Constantine's 6 columns thawed into shrugs. The avenue, having checked all its locks and reread all its maids, decided as one body that it had of course never been worried. By March, the winter piece was lining somebody's shelf paper, which is the other thing that happens to newsprint, even the truest. The season closed. The tradesmen's boys began very slowly to be paid. The railway shares had turned at last with the new century's traffic, and you knew it the same way you'd known everything from below. The butcher's boy whistling again, the good anthracite back in the cellar, the second grade left to run out. No one announced the weather had changed. In a great house, solvency, like insolvency, arrives first at the area door. And at Easter, standing in the little parlour with the linen book between you, you gave Mrs. Byrne your notice. She took it the way she took everything, with a face like a folded sheet, and read it through twice, and then she said, "Brooklyn," not as a question, because the basement telegraph runs to Brooklyn too, and had been reporting on Annie's 11 rooms for a month. A boarding house wants the same 3 things a great house wants, Nora. Clean books, a locked store closet, and a mistress the roof can trust. She looked at you over the spectacles she had finally, that winter, consented to wear. It'll have all 3. Send me the address when the range draws properly. I take my holiday in September. Which was, from Mrs. Byrne, a benediction, a testimonial, and a booking, all in 11 words, and you wrote the address for her in the linen book yourself, in May, on your last morning, under the final count of the sides to middled sheets. Madam took the news in the dressing-room, at the glass, where everything true in that house had ever been said. She was quiet a moment, and then she said, 12 years, as if checking the sum, and I shall not try to keep you. My mother always said it was vulgar to bid against a person's own life, and on the last evening after the last dinner you would ever dress her for, she did a thing that you will turn over in your hands one way and another for the rest of your days. She gave you the necklace, the other one, the paste. She took it out of the back of the safe in its velvet box and set it in your hands, and for once she looked at you, and not at the mirror, and she said, in the flat rehearsing voice, which you understood at last had never in 12 years been rehearsing anything except the strength to keep going, "It's glass and lead, and it saved this house, and no one now living can tell it from the true one across a room. You of all women will always know which is which. That is exactly why it should be yours." A pause, and then at the door of it, the closest she ever came. I have known very few honest people, Nora. It is a strange thing to say of a year like this one, but you are the most honest person I have ever employed, and I believe I could not have afforded the other kind. That was all. It was, if you keep the accounts the way the basements keep them, the largest payment ever made to you on that street. And it was made, like all the street's real payments, in a currency the banks have never listed. And the character she wrote, the page your whole life had swung on, the pen that could have sent you out naked any morning of any year, the character ran in a hand steady as engraving, honest, sober, faithful, discreet beyond any testimonial in my power to write, and leaves, to my sorrow, entirely of her own accord. You carried it down the marble stair, past the smilax hooks and the ballroom doors, out through the basement where cook cried and Albert's accent fell off mid-farewell with a crash nobody acknowledged. And the scullery girl, 15 now, taller, her hands, you noticed, beginning to be spared by the new girl under her, gave you a hemmed handkerchief with your initial done crooked in the corner, which is in the tin box to this day, and Prewitch shook your hand and said one entire sentence. You did the year well, and you went up the area steps with your box on the carrier's cart and stood on the pavement of Fifth Avenue a moment, on the front side of the railings, a member of the public, and looked up once at the house. 5 stories, 25 feet of avenue front, one lamp already lit against the May evening in a window you had cleaned from a ladder. And then you turned south, toward the bridge, toward the trains, and did not look back again, because Mrs. Byrne had taught you that too. Leave a house the way you keep one, completely. The boarding house was real. I want you to have this before the lamp goes all the way down. After a year like that one, you have earned a little architecture with your name in it. 11 rooms off the bridge trains in Brooklyn. Red brick. A lilac in the yard fighting the cats for its life. Annie's iron key from the old country hangs on a nail inside the front door. Too big for any lock in America. Hung there, Annie tells every new boarder, to remind the door what it's for. 8 boarders at $5 the week. Respectable women. 2 school teachers. A typewriter operator. That was the person in those years, not the machine. Shop girls from Fulton Street. A widow dressmaker. Clean books which are yours. A locked store closet which is yours. Order which is Annie's. And God help the boarder who tests it. You sleep past 6. The first morning you slept past 6, you woke at 10 minutes to, out of pure 12-year habit, and lay in the grey light listening for the bells board. And there was no bells board. There was no bell in any wall of the house. And you laughed out loud, alone, at nothing, at everything, and got up and lit your own stove in your own kitchen, and the fire caught the first time. And Mrs. Byrne came in September on a holiday as booked. She inspected the range, the books, the store closet, and the lilac in that order, and pronounced no verdict, which was the verdict, and drank her tea in the yard with her boots off her swollen feet in the last of the summer, and told stories about Galway that were certainly not all true, and it was the first time in all the years you had known her that you had ever seen her outside a basement in daylight. She looked smaller. She looked, in fact, like what she was, and what you now were. A woman in her later years who had spent her whole strength holding up other people's houses, sitting in the sun, at last beside a house that would hold her up instead, even for an afternoon. The avenue went on without you. It had never needed any particular one of you. That was the first thing the 28-inch stair taught everybody. Some of those great houses this channel has walked through room by room on other nights, and their marble biographies are their own stories. The Fairley house keeps its true name folded inside a made-up one, even here, even now, because this channel keeps its bargain even with the dead. But their world, the world of 14 to 4, of the bells boards and the character and the man at the railing, their world had, though not one soul on the street would have believed it that September, about a dozen good years left to run. You kept the tin box under your own bed now, in your own house. There was no longer any earthly reason to keep most of what it kept. You kept it anyway, boxes do. So now, at last, in the quiet of your own kitchen, with the lamp low and the boarders long asleep and the bridge trains gone drowsy in the distance, we can open the packet with the grey ribbon, because you have earned the right to see it, and I have kept you waiting all night on purpose, the way the truth kept itself waiting all year. Letters, 9 of them, and not one of them is yours. They are the letters you were given to post across 12 years and 3 households and did not post. Understand exactly what these are, because the world above stairs never once thought about this power, and the world below stairs thought about it every single day. The lady's maid posted Madame's letters, all of them, which means that on certain nights, the very bad nights, the chloral nights, the nights after the counting went to 18 and 19, the nights a marriage finally said out loud what the trays had been reporting for a year, a letter would be written at 1 in the morning in a hand like a fever chart, sealed with shaking fingers and handed to you. Post it first thing. A letter to a husband's brother that would have split a family like kindling. A letter to a man who was not a husband at all. 11 pages that would have ended a house. A letter from your second mistress, the counting one, addressed to her own grown daughter, which you read once, standing by a bedroom fire at 2 in the morning, because you had to know whether it was the kind of letter after which you fetch the doctor at once, quietly, or the kind after which you fetch nothing and watch the door all night. It was the second kind, but only just, and in the morning this happened not once but again and again, in every house to every woman in your trade. It was one of the deep unwritten services. In the morning a grey face would find you before breakfast and say, in a voice scraped clean, "Nora, that letter, you haven't." "The Morning Post was missed, madam. I'm very sorry, I have it still." The lie of the missed post, the kindest lie in service. You watched relief go through these women like blood coming back into a hand. Most of them took the letter back and burned it themselves right there, and that was the whole story. Over, unhappened. But some of them, and this is the strange human centre of it, this is why the packet exists. Some of them could not bear to take it back, could not touch the thing, as if the words might go off in their fingers. Burn it, they'd say, not looking at it, and you would carry it away, and you found, the first time, standing over the kitchen range with the lid lifted and the heat on your face, that you could not quite do it either, because you had stood the watch. You knew what it had cost to write it, and it seemed to you a rectory-raised girl's scruple that hardened into a rule, that a thing which had nearly been the end of somebody was not rubbish, and deserved better than to be thrown in with the tea leaves before breakfast. And perhaps, underneath, you already understood what you were really holding, the proof, in 9 hands, in 9 sealed envelopes, that every performing marble house on that avenue had a midnight in it that the morning never met. Unexploded shells, everyone, any single envelope in that packet posted or sold, and Mr. Considine, Mark, never knew the packet existed, or the year would have needed a different ending and a worse one. Any one of them could have done what the fire did to the Windsor, only slower and in print. So on a Sunday evening in your 3rd Brooklyn autumn, with Annie at church and the house to yourself, you took the packet out and settled the accounts of the discretion economy, 1 envelope at a time. 1 went back. Only 1 could. The counting lady was 4 years dead by then, quietly, abroad, at a spa with a kind name, the way that centuries' ladies were tidied off its stage. But her daughter's married address was in the social register on the parlour shelf, and the letter was the daughter's by every law that matters. You did not open it again. You wrapped it in fresh paper and posted it with no note, no sender, from a post office 2 neighbourhoods away, and what it said, and what the daughter felt, and whether it was mercy or cruelty to send a dead woman's 2 in the morning heart to her child, you never learned, and neither will we. Some doors this channel does not open. It only tells you truly where they are. The other 8 went into the stove. You fed them in 1 at a time, seals unbroken. You never read the 8. The one you read on duty, and duty was over. And the fire took each envelope, the way fire takes paper, a brown scorch spreading like a stain on silk, a bloom of flame, a black ghost of a rectangle rising and breaking apart, and with each one you said nothing at all, because there was nothing that was yours to say. It was the last service. The stove ticked, the lilac scratched at the yard fence. 8 houses on the finest street in America became, one small fire at a time, exactly what they had always paid so much to appear: households with nothing to hide. And when the 9th ribbon of ash went up the flue, the woman at the stove, 30-some years old, or 50 by then, or 80, 100 women at 100 stoves, remember, this is every one of them at once, closed the stove door and washed her hands at her own sink, and was, for the first time since a gangplank in 1887, a person carrying nothing that could hurt anybody. What they knew died with them, mostly. That mostly is the reason you and I could sit here tonight at all. A scrap in a Reform Commission's minutes, a registry ledger sold for wastepaper and saved by an antiquarian, a pawnbroker's daybook, a housekeeper's linen book with an address in Brooklyn written in the back of it in a hand not her own. The sea floor of history is littered with the discretion economy's small wreckage, and scholars dive for it now, and every fragment they bring up says the same thing the whole avenue's basements could have told anyone who asked. We saw everything. We said nothing. That was the position. And the world that ran on that bargain, give it one last look from the roof, because it is going. It went the way worlds actually go. Not with a crash, but with a change in the help-wanted columns. The dewy arch, your triumphal Rome of plaster, was soft as wedding cake within a year. They pulled it down in 1900, and the seahorses went to a wrecker's yard, which is the honest fate of most triumph. Where the Windsor burned, commerce politely built over the scar inside 2 years, and the avenue below Central Park began turning block by block from marble houses into shops selling marble house things to people who would never keep 14 servants. The society weekly that lived on bought secrets was dragged into a courtroom in the middle of the new century's first decade, and its subscription-shaped blackmail was read into the public record at last, to the noisy joy of the very papers that had run the same trade at wholesale. The income tax arrived in 1913 and began, with a bookkeeper's patience, to do what no scandal ever did. Then the war took the footmen, and the factories and the shops and the typewriters took the housemaids. Why stand very still for $25 a month and a bell in the wall, when a person could earn as much by daylight and own her own evenings? And the great houses found, one season at a time, that the second house under the first one could no longer be staffed at any wage that the first one could survive paying. Within 30 years of your last look up at those windows, the grandest of them, palaces you carried water in, ballrooms whose parquet you saw swept at 4 a.m, came down under the wrecker's ball to make room for department stores and apartment blocks, and a synagogue, and the plain tall future, and the sons of the 400 sold at auction the plate their fathers' butlers had counted twice a year, 312 pieces at a time. It all went. The bells boards went to the junk men with the wire still on them. And here is the last inventory of the night, so hold out your hands. What survived of everything this story touched? The bridge trains still run, the park is still there, and the plane trees. In the glass cases of the city's museums there are gowns from the Rue de la Paix with 400 hours of some unnamed woman's needlework in every hem, labelled with the names of the ladies who wore them. And in more than one old family's safe deposit box to this day there lies a necklace that the heirs firmly believe to be diamonds. And paste warms in the hand, remember, and diamonds stay cold, and nobody now living has thought to check, because the woman who could tell the difference in the dark with her eyes shut was never in the family albums to begin with. She was the one holding the lamp. Let her hold it a little longer. The lamp is going down now anyway, and this is the part of the night that belongs to you. Because you have been the servant tonight. You see that, don't you, now that we're at the bottom of the stairs? All night you have stood where she stood, behind the mirror, at the railing, on the roof over the parade, and you have heard what she heard and priced what she priced, and now you are the one holding what the house never knew, and it is heavy, and it is midnight. And here is the oldest truth of the second house, the one every tired woman on that avenue knew in her bones by 10 o'clock. The knowing can be put down at night. It has to be. That was how they survived it, all of them, the whole invisible regiment, not by feeling nothing, but by learning the one skill the great world never valued because it could not see it. How to set the whole day's weight on the floor by the bed, like a loaded tray, and leave it there until morning. The tray will keep. The trays always keep. So set it down. You've done your positions, every one. The fires are laid. That's done. Let it be done. The doors are bolted and the plate is counted, all 312 pieces, and not one fork is missing, and nobody will count anything again until morning. The gown is sponged and hung. The hairpins are in their dish, all 104. You needn't count them again. I counted them with you. They're all there. The letters are ash, and the ash is cold, and the one that had to go home has gone home. The man at the railing is gone up the avenue with his envelope, refused, finished, and he is never coming back. That is over. It came out all right. You can stop holding it now. You're safe enough. You're warm enough. You've done enough. You have a bed that is yours, and a door that locks from your own side, and a key on a nail to remind the door what it's for. That's more than the century gave almost anyone it worked as hard as it worked you. That's enough. Tomorrow there will be breakfasts, 8 of them, and the range to light. Tomorrow there will be books to keep and Borders' small weather to read. Tomorrow the bells of Brooklyn will ring for people who can lie still and just listen to them. But that's tomorrow. Tomorrow is on the other side of the dark, and it cannot ring any bell in your wall. Because there is no bell in your wall. There is no bell in your wall. Right now there is only this. The banked fire ticking as it cools, the way the range ticked in the basement on the good quiet nights. The house settling around its held warmth, beam by beam, the way great houses settle around their secrets. Only this house has none. This house is only holding people safely in the dark. Somewhere far off, a late train over the bridge, faint as the surf sound of a parade a long time ago, going away, going away. The same sound as last night, the same as tomorrow night, the same as all the nights stretching out ahead of you, paid for and peaceful and yours. Centuries will pass. The avenue you knew will change past all recognition. The marble fronts will come down and the towers will go up and the towers themselves will grow old. The last bell wire will rust away inside a wall no one remembers is hollow. But people will still lie awake at the end of the long days, carrying things they cannot say. Still set the weight down at midnight. Still keep every one of them in some inside pocket of the heart, sewn flat where it presses on the skin, the small blue ticket of everything they know and will not tell. Some things don't change. The keeping doesn't change. And the rest, the mercy of it, doesn't change either. That every day, however heavy, however watched, however laced tight, every day, at the end of it, unhooks and comes off and is hung up in the dark to be dealt with by somebody's tomorrow. Armour off, so let it come. Let sleep take you the way it took a woman from Monaghan in an attic room over Fifth Avenue 60 years' worth of nights ago. Quickly, between one breath and the next, 5 floors above the banked fires, 1 star in the airshaft sky. Let the great house of the day go quiet under you, room by room, floor by floor, the lamps going out in order, the doors sighing shut. Let the bells board of your mind go dark, every small wire slack, every room done needing you. Let your hands, which have carried so much, open on the coverlet. Let your thoughts slow and soften and stand down from their positions and finally stop. You saw everything. You may say nothing. You may sleep. You've earned this rest 104 times over. Take it. And dream, if you dream at all, of a warm kitchen below a sleeping house, and griddle cakes at 10 o'clock for no reason, and every fork in the world accounted for. Good night.